मिलना है हमें। चलो उनके लिए कुछ लेते चले और उनको दुआएं देते चले। थोड़ी गुंजिया बुंजिया लेते चले, थोड़ी बर्फी बर्फी लेते चले। आज उनसे मिलना है हमें।
Welcome, Mukesh sir.
Hello, Chami. We're so glad that you accepted our dinner invitation.
Hi, Neel and Riya. It's so nice of you to invite us for dinner. It is always great talking to you.
We really owe you a big thanks for all your valuable guidance on so many matters concerning NRIs like us. We request you to accept this gift from us to express our gratitude. We hope you like it.
Well, thank you. I hope there is no big treasure in it. Otherwise, we will end up paying tax.
Oh, does one need to pay income tax on gifts received in India? We would like to know more about that.
Well, Mukesh sir, can we enlighten both Neel and Riya today on tax liabilities on gifts received and given by NRIs both in India and abroad?
Certainly.
Wow! That would be simply great to learn. It would be so useful not just for us as NRIs but our friends and relatives too.
जोड़ जाते हैं कुछ तोहफे हमको तुमसे, जोड़ जाते हैं कुछ तोहफे दिल को दिल से।
कुछ रिश्तों के नाम नहीं होते, इसलिए तो वो खास होते हैं।
The first point that arises for the consideration is that whether there is any tax liability for NRIs in respect of gifts that they receive while on a visit to India.
Well, Chami, let me explain. When a non-resident is on a visit to India, he has to keep in mind that in India we do not have gift tax as it was once upon a time. Because when we had gift tax, the tax was levied in the hands of the donor, the person who gives the gift. But currently, the provision is that the receipt of gift is treated as income in the hands of the recipient.
Okay.
So, when an NRI is visiting India, technically under the provisions of section 56(2), the value of the gift that he receives is treated as his income. Of course, there are exemptions and there is a basic exemption limit as well. The basic exemption limit in respect of gifts received in a financial year is rupees 50,000, and this applies in respect of all aggregate gifts that you receive, whether from one or more persons.
Okay.
But the moment you step over the limit of 50,000, then the entire amount is taxed as your income and you have to pay tax on that at the normal applicable rates. Say for example, if the NRI is receiving a gift which is purely taxable and it is within his exemption limit of 2,50,000, you know, the income tax exemption limit, and he has no other income, then there will be obviously no liability to tax. You also need to keep in mind that, you see, once you have exceeded 50,000, whether you are entitled to any exemptions. Now, the exemption in respect of gift, one of the most important exemption is that when you have received a gift from a person who is a close relative, you know, we have relatives specified under the provisions of section 56(2), which you need to take a look at. So, if you receive gift from any of these close specified relatives, then obviously there is no financial limit. Any amount of gift that you get would be exempt. You also need to keep in mind that both gifts of money as well as gifts in kind are treated as taxable when you consider this 50,000 limit. Of course, as far as the gifts in kind are concerned, there is again a specified list which includes immovable property, shares, securities, bullion, jewelry and ornaments, etc. But a number of gifts which you would think in the normal sense, Chami, are gifts. Say for example, I give you a gift of an iPhone or even a television or motor car. They are not included in the list of specified gifts in kind, and therefore irrespective of the value of such specified gifts in kind, there would be no tax.
Okay.
So broadly, a non-resident has to keep in mind from whom he or she is accepting the gift, and secondly, whether that gift comes in the specified list if it is in the nature of a gift in kind.
Okay, but many NRIs come to India for their own wedding. Are there any specific exemptions for wedding gifts received by a bride or a bridegroom?
Well, you have asked a very important question. You know, at least even with gifts being taxed as income, I am sure the bride and bridegroom would wish that, well, the wedding gifts at least that we get from other than relatives. You know, we talked earlier, if it is a gift from a close specified relative, obviously there is no question of any tax as far as gifts is concerned. Or even if it is a gift in kind which does not fall in the specified list, there is no issue. But presuming that it is from a non-relative and it is a specified gift, well, fortunately, Chami, there is an important exception under section 56(2) which says that any amount, and there is no financial ceiling, any amount or value of gifts that you receive on the occasion of your wedding, that is completely exempt.
Okay.
Now, don't ask me how many weddings you are permitted. Well, fortunately, the law does not expect that you would divorce and marry over again. But technically, if you have to ask me, well, whether it is your first, second or third wedding, every time there is a wedding, you will indeed get exempt gifts, whether in cash or in kind. The only thing, as bride or bridegroom, you have to remember is that in case you are receiving gifts from, say, your in-laws, particularly I am talking of a daughter-in-law who is receiving gifts from the father-in-law or mother-in-law. Now, this is a gift which is covered within the scope of section 64 of the Income Tax Act, where the clubbing provisions apply. And the clubbing provisions say that any income arising out of such gifts that are received, by the son's wife, because the daughter-in-law is the son's wife, is required to be added back or clubbed in the hands of the individual. So, it may happen that the father-in-law or mother-in-law live here in India, they have given a gift at the time of the wedding. The value of the gift is taken overseas and there is income on that. Well, the tax authorities may say technically that income is liable to be clubbed in the income of the father or mother-in-law. So, you need to be a little cautious at the time. Even if you are accepting, say, a gift on the occasion of the wedding from your spouse or your father-in-law or mother-in-law who come within the scope of section 64, Chami, it would be a smart thing if you can ensure that you get it just before your Saptapadi, as we call, because that is the time in a Hindu wedding when the wedding is complete. So the occasion is of a wedding, but you have technically received the gift before the wedding is accomplished.
Okay.
And therefore, you can smartly escape the clubbing provisions as well.
Okay. Well, that was interesting to know. But Mukesh sir, what about the money and properties received by an NRI under will or inheritance? Are these also liable to income tax?
Well, Chami, that brings us to a third exception in respect of taxability of gifts. See, under section 56(2), just as we saw in respect of close relatives or certain specified gifts in kind or gifts on the occasion of wedding, there is one more exception, and that is that if you receive anything either in cash or in kind under a will or inheritance. Now, will is succession, you know, property is left to you by your parents or some distant relatives or a family friend or whatever, or inheritance, you know, when there is no will, it's a case of inheritance. You know, as a natural legal heir, you receive some value of properties. In both these cases, importantly, there is a complete exemption, so there will be no taxability in regard to such properties that you receive, though one may say they are gifts because you have received them without any consideration, but they are completely exempt.
Wow.
So that brings up an interesting aspect for consideration. You know, when you have to receive gifts during your lifetime, you know, only if you receive such gifts from a person who is a close relative, they would be exempt.
Okay.
But if you receive any properties under succession or inheritance, say under the will, or you know, by as a legal heir, or somebody, particularly inheritance is only for legal heirs, but under a will it could be even a non-relative. So if you are to receive something from a person who is a non-relative, it may be a good idea to suggest that instead of giving as a lifetime gift, give it by way of succession under a will, mentioning it under the will, and if you receive it even from a distant relative or a family friend who are otherwise not exempt under section 56(2), as far as, just as we saw on the occasion of marriage, you can receive anything from anybody is exempt. Similarly, under will or inheritance, if you receive anything from anybody, it is completely exempt from income tax.
Mukesh sir, I have a friend in the US who keeps sending regular remittances to her parents. You explained that in India, gifts received by an individual from close relatives are exempt from tax. By this logic, I believe there will be no tax liability in such a case. But can you explain who are covered within the meaning of the term relative?
Well, Riya, you asked a very important question. Chami, I think Riya has now started learning our NRI jargon very well, and she's asking very smart, intelligent questions.
Thank you, Mukesh sir. It feels so good coming from you.
Actually, Riya, please keep in mind that any person who is a resident in India and has close relatives who are NRIs or non-residents living abroad, well, it is but natural that the NRIs may send, you know, monies by way of gift for purposes of maintenance or whatever, you know, to their close relatives in India. Now, the question that she has asked is, who is covered within the meaning of the term close or specified relatives under section 56(2). I think to best explain to you, let me take you through a small audio visual, which I had once presented when I gave a presentation on tax planning via gifts. And there is a very important, interesting analytical chart which explains as to who is covered and who is not covered. Because sometimes we think, like you and I are cousins, we think that we are close relatives. We are indeed in the social term, but the Income Tax Act thinks differently.
Okay.
And the Income Tax Act, quite interestingly also, keep in mind, Riya, if you give a gift to your uncle will have to pay tax on that. Why? Because receiving gift by you from your uncle, that is treated as exempt. But the reverse gear is not covered within the meaning and scope of the term relative. So looking at this little presentation is going to be very useful.
That was real useful to know. Mukesh sir, I too have questions on what would be the tax liability on such gifts in my country of residence, the United States. Could you please guide on the same?
Well, Neel, first of all, thank you for the dinner, and I would love to take care of all your queries, but the restaurant looks quite full. I think why don't we step out and get into the coffee shop in the lounge where we can sit, relax and converse on these points.
Wow,
Chami?
that's a great idea.
Let's go then.